if I'm tracking my money and I'm not spending more than I make, then I'm good.
All of a sudden you're 55 and you haven't saved anything for retirement.
You've been living within your means the whole time. What's the
Yes.
problem?
Lulled into a false sense of security.
Totally.
We're Nick and Hannah True, and we're here to help you do more with your money. Welcome to Craft Your Money Story, a Mapped Out Money podcast. Back in the Airstream, just like old days.
And just like old days, it's a marathon to try and record one podcast.
Yeah, we've had like a million different hurdles.
But we're here and we're filming it. This is actually the first time we've ever filmed a podcast in the Airstream.
It is. So we're camping in like Middle Tennessee. Is this Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, Crossville.
Okay, I don't do geography. But so we've had some chilling time around the campfire. We have had some adventurous time.
We did. We went in the middle of nowhere to this like fog light food house.
Yeah, it was very good.
It was
cool.
Very right on the river.
Yeah, and like there's like train tracks that go by it, and I don't know. It was just
It is
cool
literally
vibe.
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it reminded me. Was it Agatha's Tea House in Canada?
I could not tell you. It's in the top of Banff. I could not tell you what the name of the tea house was.
You hike into that tea house, and you didn't have to hike into this restaurant, but the vibe, it kind of had that.
Yes. Once you're there, it's like
vibe.
on the mountain and there's nothing else around.
Yeah, it was very fun. So, yeah, we've kind of had a different mix of activities.
There's a little bit of an unplug, get some reading in. Board games.
And I beat you in one round. We've been playing this like national parks game, and I never win anything. And so I won a round. That's major news. So
you do. I was telling you the whole time. I was like, "You're going to beat me this game," and you were like, "No."
Well, actually, he was saying, "You're going to crush me," and then I ended up winning by like 2 points or something.
No, you got me by 3.
Yeah, well, anytime I would do something that like messed you up, you were like, "What? You're going to crush me already and you have to do that?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." Because we both know I'm going to beat you by a point if I win. So, yeah.
It's been a good week.
Good times.
Yeah.
It has been a good week.
Well, I want to kind of talk about moving from tracking to proactively planning with your money and then actually sticking to the budget. I think it becomes a really common problem that I see where folks are like, yeah, I got into this situation where I just wanted to do this. I wanted to buy that. I wanted to go here, whatever it is. I knew it wasn't in the budget and I just knew I'll just deal with this later.
Yeah.
And so I think what's even more interesting is like the type of person we're talking to in this example is not just somebody who is like not budgeting at all. It's somebody who they're tracking their money, they're doing their routines, they're categorizing transactions right. They know what they're doing. They're using a budgeting tool and keeping track of it, but they're not actually using it to make decisions. And in fact, they almost will make decisions knowing that it's not in the budget, and they're like, I'll just cover the overspending later.
Yeah. So this is probably you if you're getting to the end of the month and when you look at your budget, you have spent more in categories than you are happy with.
Bingo.
So you're like, oh man, we spent $1,000 eating out this month and I'm not happy about it. That isn't what I wanted to do.
I think the other different thing that also comes up here with a lot of these folks is they're still living within their means, right? So the idea is, oh, well, if I'm tracking my money and I'm not spending more than I make, then I'm good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that becomes problematic down the road, as we're going to see here in a minute, because simply just living within your means on this week or this month.
And by that, you mean not going into debt?
Not going into debt. Basically just not spending more than you made. So if you get paid every 2 weeks or every week or once a month or whatever it is, if you just like don't spend more than you made in that pay period, you're, quote, living within your means.
Yeah.
And that should be the goal, right? And it's like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is to use your money to achieve the goals and the dreams and the visions that you have, which is going to require you to live below your means and be able to store up money for the future. But I think a lot of the time people can get into this routine where if they're tracking their money and they're living within their means, yeah, they got to, cover some overspending and move money around, but like,
it's almost
I'm
like
fine,
you
right?
can get like lulled into a false sense of security.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I'm not going into debt. And it's like, yeah, but all of a sudden, in fact, you had somebody say this, I think, on a call. It's like all of a sudden you wake up and you're 55 and you haven't saved anything for retirement.
Yep.
And so
you've been living within your means the whole time. What's the
Yes.
problem?
Yes. And so I think there's different degrees that this can play out. That's kind of the most severe degree, I think. And then you can also just get to the end of your life or the end of a month and look and go like, man, the way I spent this money was not aligned with my values.
Totally.
And that's a bummer.
Yeah.
And so like, we want to be good stewards. We want to spend things in alignment with what we've laid out in our values and visions. And so when we're not doing that, it can be a frustrating thing.
Totally. So that's kind of the problem that I want to, discuss. And I thought we could frame it up with the two issues that I most commonly see when this problem comes up. And so basically, if someone says to me like, yeah, I'm, tracking, but I'm not really using the budget, before I spend.
Yeah. So you're not using it to help you make decisions.
Bingo.
Like, do I want to make this trade-off in order to get this thing now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually the first issue, right? So I said there's two. The first one is they're not embracing the concept of trade-offs. And so it's not that they don't recognize that there's trade-offs. People know that life requires trade-offs. But what I see is people are not proactively thinking and recognizing, oh, when I say yes to this thing right now, that means that I'm going to say no to something else, either now or in the future. And so rather than doing I'm just going to do it and I'll clean it up in the budget later or when I do my end of month or whatever, we want to move towards proactively saying, okay, I'm going to do this. What do I want to trade off?
Yeah.
What am I willing to go, all right, well, I'm going to have to say no. Let's go ahead and proactively say no. And simply not embracing that idea of trade-offs or pretending that trade-offs don't exist or not really thinking about the trade-off is kind of the first issue that I see.
Yeah. So I think like there's two things that brings to mind for me. And one is just, back in our episode on maintenance mode, was that last week?
Yeah, episode 89.
Okay. Anyways, we talked about this idea that like as humans, we have the desire for limitlessness. And Jen Wilkin talks about this in her book, None Like Him, about how that's an attribute of God that as humans, we are like sinfully drawn to emulate, but that we are not supposed to emulate.
I think it's interesting because when you read that book and you look at the attributes that she lists and stuff, it's almost always like the same attributes that humans are striving for in like all mythological stories, right? It's like the guy who wants to seek like, immortality or omnipotence or whatever.
Well, like so it's the same thing. It's kind of like technology,
yes,
right? And so, and I thought this was an interesting point that she drew out. The internet, what it does is like mask our limits because, okay, now all of a sudden we're not as limited by our physical location. We can like contact people all over the world and have Zoom calls and whatever.
Or we're not limited by our knowledge. Look at all this knowledge that I can have because of the internet. Yeah.
But like you really can't. And social media, look at all of these relationships I can have. And it's like, yeah, but those aren't real relationships. That's not true connection with somebody. But it makes us feel like the limit is removed. And that's why we like things like that. And that's why we're drawn to them. But anyway, so we inherently, I think it's important to recognize that we inherently have this resistance to acknowledging our limits. And so just like we were talking about in the maintenance mode episode, that it is hard to accept I can't grow in all of these areas all at once.
Yeah.
I have to put some things into maintenance. It's hard for us to accept like we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't get this thing that we want right now that's not in our budget and also not have to take from something else. Like there's got to be a trade-off there. There's a limit there.
One of the things I always tell people too is when I'm talking about this is even if you're the richest person in the world, right? If you're Jeff Bezos, at the end of Jeff Bezos' life, we could count the amount of money that he made, and it would be a finite number.
Yeah.
And so while, yes, it feels limitless, it's actually not limitless. It does have a limit. There's a number. You could count it, and you could allocate it and spend it all. And that means that no matter how much money you make, even if you're, because I get this all the time with business owners, they're like, oh, I'm just going to make more money. And no matter how much you make, no matter how much you have, like there's still a limit to it. It's still finite. And anytime you allocate money to do one thing, you are inherently saying no to something else. I'm just trying to get you to admit it.
Yeah.
And plan for it ahead of time.
Yeah. You know what I just thought about, which this is ridiculous because I also, I put a clip from Mean Girls in, I think, last week's episode too.
I saw that.
But, Katie Heron or whatever, when she's like, the answer to the mathlete's
The
problem
limit does
or
not
whatever,
exist.
the limit
Yes.
does not exist. I'm like, this is not, the limit does exist.
The limit definitely exists.
So, but anyways, the whole time you were talking, I was thinking of
You're just
Katie
thinking
Heron.
about it. Okay, great.
Sorry.
Thank you for this added value.
Oh, you're welcome. I know. But that somebody's going to remember something because of Katie Heron.
There you go. I like it. Mm-hmm. So that's the first issue.
Yeah, bring us back here.
The first issue is
the limit does exist.
Your limit does exist, and you need to embrace that.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. Like, just by embracing that, it's not enough to actually move towards using the budget to make those trade-offs, to make those decisions. And that's where the second thing comes in, which is you have to have a compelling vision. You have to have a compelling why, whatever you want to call it. And I want to take this even a step further. We've talked about vision a lot in the past, but one of the things I want to make sure we hammer today is the importance of having that vision and have it connected to the budget in short, medium, and long-term ways.
Yeah.
Because what I find is that when I say, I want you to spend in alignment with your values, what happens
we focus on short-term
is
values.
we focus on short-term values.
Yeah.
And so I'll be talking with a client and they say, well,
Instant
this
gratification.
thing came up. Maybe it's my best friend invited me to go on a weekend trip next month.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to go. And, having good relationships is a value of mine that's really important to me. And so even though I didn't have it in my budget, I decided to, go ahead and just not contribute to my retirement accounts this month so that I can go on this trip with my friend. And well, that's in alignment with my values. So how do you say like, no, that wasn't a good move, or yes, that was a good move?
Yeah.
And that's where
you have to have a more holistic view.
Bingo.
And you have to recognize like there's an infinite number of good things
Totally.
for you to spend your money on. Like, is it good to go on trips with friends and build relationships? Like, sure, yes. Is it good to save for retirement? Yes. But you can't do it all. You can't do all of the good things. So it's that like trading the good for great idea that comes up a lot.
I think, and with that example, what's interesting too, right, is like depending on the person, the answer would be different. Mm-hmm. There are absolutely some people who I would look at their budget and look at and go, hey, listen, we've already done like a lot of relationship building stuff and we're a little bit behind on where you kind of say you want to be retirement wise. So I think this might be an instance where you need to brainstorm some other ways to build deep relationship with that friend that are not
this trip. Yeah.
So that we can still prioritize the retirement account. But then there might be somebody else where I would look at and go, hey man, like you're good, you're well on your way with retirement. You're actually probably contributing a little extra to be where you need to be.
I think that's probably hard for a lot of people to imagine, but there are people that struggle with the other end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. And so like, I actually think this is great. Like we could just skip next month's Roth IRA contribution and we should go on the trip. It just depends. And it depends on who I'm talking to and the progress that they're having towards all of those short, medium, and long-term goals and kind of how they play together as to whether or not that decision is, quote, in alignment with your values.
Yeah. But practically speaking, for the average person, it's like if you don't put some time into thinking about this and if you don't force yourself to, in the moment, assess, okay, if I want this thing that's kind of more impulsive and that I didn't plan for in my budget, like we're all pretty much, most of us, okay, I won't say all, most of us are going to go, yeah, I'll just not contribute to my retirement funds this month in order to be able to spend more to go on this trip.
Easy. Yeah.
Like, no big deal. I'll make up for it next month. Yeah. And we're always going to make that trade.
Yep.
And so you have to be disciplined enough to not put yourself in the position to make that trade.
Yeah.
And like you said, the way you do that is by getting really clear on your vision and knowing like, okay, this isn't just my retirement funds. This is this whole vision that I've laid out. So like when I'm 65, I want to have the flexibility to move closer to where my kids live.
Yes.
And I want to not have to work a second job after I retire because I want to be able to spend more time with my grandkids and all of these things that are actually compelling reasons for you not to just spend more right now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have those in your mind. And then you have to force yourself to, if you still decide you want to do this thing that you hadn't budgeted for, you're going to take it from something more short term. So,
Yeah.
okay, I've made my retirement savings non-negotiable. So those are going to get, my money is going to go there. So I have to take from my eating out this month or my clothing money or something that you're going to feel more right now.
That's a great point. And that's kind of, we have these discussions a lot. And so if we were going to sort of make this super,
I'm just smiling because we do have these conversations all the time. Like we will have spent like all of our eating out budget and I'm like, hey, let's go out to dinner. And Nick's like, all right, what do you want to trade off? And I'm like, can we not just go? Can we just go let out? Me go out to dinner? Like, but that's why things stay on track. So
that's why we stay on track.
I do appreciate that you do that.
Well,
even though I roll my eyes heavily when you do it.
Tactically, what this looks like, we have, anybody listening to this knows that we budget a lot and we use YNAB as a tool we use. And for context, we have probably 70-ish, I think last I looked, maybe 75 categories in our budget, which might sound like a lot to some people. I will tell you that when I work with people, I would say 60 to 80 is like medium. That's like average. So we're kind of right in the middle. But anyways, so we've got like 70 something categories and some of them are short term this month. They're bills we have to pay, they're groceries, gas, eating out, clothing, all that stuff. Some of them are medium term. So medium term, I would say, is anything that's, let's say, 6 months to 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so those are going to be things like Christmas, saving up for birthday gifts and, Mother's Day and Father's Day gifts and all those things. That's going to be some sort of vacation that we have that's a year out from now. That's going to be also some kind of irregular stuff that's like truck, maintenance or Airstream maintenance, all that stuff that can happen in that time frame. And then you get the really long-term stuff, which is retirement contributions. And for us, would be like down payment on a house in the future.
Yeah. And I think that mid-range stuff is like so
the mid-range stuff is real tough to pull from. It's real tough. And so generally when we are making trade-offs, we just did it this week. We're camping here and, it's always a little bit of a test when we're camping to see how good the internet's going to be. And so we decided kind of while we were here, hey, internet seems good. I think we can work from here for a little longer. Do you want to extend the trip by 3 nights? And that was going to end up costing an extra $150. It's not the end of the world. Like we can, we can work that into our budget, but we didn't have the $150 already allocated for this trip.
Yeah.
And so it meant that we had to pull it from somewhere else. And so the rule that we try to follow is using, like you said, if we want to do the extra camping, we have to look at other short-term items like eating out or clothing or entertainment fund money. And we need to move money from one of those categories to cover the shorter term today impulse thing that we want to do. Where you get in trouble and where people really, kind of wreck themselves is they start pulling from all those medium term things. Like you just said, they start taking from Christmas.
We go, we've
property
got
taxes.
$1,000 in Christmas. We'll just take from that.
Oh, the insurance isn't due for like 10 months. Yeah. We can just take a little insurance money.
But then Christmas rolls around and you're not going to look at the kids and be like, oh, actually, I spent more than I planned.
Yeah.
6 months ago on
sorry, buddy,
such and such and never caught back up. So no presents this year.
Yeah.
Or,
you're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. And that goes back to, like you said, the comment that we got from a client who said, look, we were having this conversation and he was like, yeah. And if you're not careful, these, constantly stealing from the medium and long-term stuff for the short term,
you just keep doing it.
You keep doing it to infinity, and then you end up, in your 60s and 70s, and it's not fun. And so in order to avoid doing that, right, stealing from the medium and long-term stuff for the short term, one of the things that we like to do as part of our vision, right, so our vision document, we've talked about this in a previous episode. We'll link it in the description below. It's called Don't Hate Your Budget on YouTube. But one of the things we talk about is having that 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and then having the future dreams area. And for a lot of people, you need to spend a little bit of time thinking about that future dreams and thinking about what you want retirement to look like, and then working backwards to today. So I'm about to get like super nerdy for a second, but I have built a lot of spreadsheets that map out if we want to live X dollar lifestyle, in retirement, we want to be able to spend X dollars per year. Then we need Y dollars to retire, meaning we need this much money total in our retirement accounts by age, 62. And so based on how much we have today, we need to be contributing Z every month in order to stay on track to that.
Yeah.
I do this a lot with clients, and I'm hopefully going to make some more YouTube videos about it and show some tools like that and stuff later this year that we use to do this. But this is an important topic because when I think about us contributing to our retirement accounts, when we look at those categories in YNAB, when I have them in there, I'm not just thinking about some vague,
account
balance, like, oh, add more to the 401k.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm thinking about is the vision that we have created for retirement. And so, when I go to take money, if we're like, oh, do you want to do this thing? And we are like, we could, just not contribute to the retirement account this month. We could just not contribute to the retirement account next month. I mean, what's a couple of months, really? When we do that,
there are tangible
like
dreams that we have that are
it's not like
because
this
of that.
amorphous sort of, just account that I'm just like, well, it's a little bit low. It's like, no. I am directly decreasing the odds that we actually achieve that, future vision that we have.
Yeah. I think one of the things that sticks out to me, because this conversation can kind of go different ways depending on, maybe you've noticed patterns of like certain areas that you tend to overspend on and that you tend to have to cover from things, like retirement or whatever. And so I think like if what you struggle with the most is more fun spending, just general things that you want, coming across a lot of things that you want, and you tend to go overboard and then like retroactively see that and have to cover it from somewhere and be like, oh, dang, I bought all this stuff and I kind of can't even remember what I got, I think if that's the bucket that you find yourself in the moment when you are assessing items, like, should I buy this random pair of pants that I found? Should I buy this mug? Should I buy this plant? Whatever. I'm naming all the things I want to buy. Asking yourself if it's worth trading that future flexibility. And again, it's like you have to function from this place of like, okay, I am going to discipline myself enough to only spend this amount that I said that I was going to spend for fun.
Yep.
And so if I am truly going to discipline myself in that way, and I am not going to take from my retirement, and I'm not going to take from Christmas savings and all of this money that looks so available, but is really not, it already has a job, then am I willing to trade my future flexibility to be able to buy something that I've come across for this thing that I am holding right here? And I think you get better at that the more you do it. I used to be terrible at that. And like you helped me learn how to do that. And the longer we've budgeted for, the better I've gotten at doing that and assessing things in that way. And like most of the time, even, I might go somewhere and put something in my buggy and be planning to buy it. And by the time I've like made it up to the register, I'm like, I actually don't think I'm willing to trade like my future ability to buy something for this thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep my money in my fun spending.
Yeah.
And then I think another common area that we see people struggling with is like wanting to go overboard on gift giving.
Totally.
I'm like, oh, my friend just had a baby. I just want to buy him all the gifts. Or, my best friend's getting married or whatever.
Yeah. Or my kid, they only turned 10 once.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's their 10th
so
birthday.
Just want to like go wild.
Yeah.
And that's not bad if you want to do that and the money is in your budget to do that and you want to trade off. Maybe you want to take your fun spending money and instead of spending it on what you would normally spend it on, you want to dedicate that to buying a wedding gift for your best friend.
Yeah.
Or, extra money towards the wedding gift or whatever. But you can really get into trouble when you allow yourself to take from those mid and long term range things, because there's always something good. There's always something good to direct that money towards and experience that goodness now and miss out on things later.
And I think it's hard because I think partly people have a hard time admitting to themselves. So a big part of the process when I'm working with somebody is I ask them a lot of questions about what do they typically do? Do y'all do this? Do you do that? And people tend to dramatically undershoot what they do.
Yeah.
And so, the gift giving is the exact one that comes to mind when you said that, because people are like, when you just ask them, how much do you want to spend for each of your kids for their birthdays? And let's say their kids are, elementary to high school. They will say a number, and I'll push on a little bit. And I go, okay, do you tend to throw parties, friends come over, or is it just family? And they're like, well, I mean, yeah, we have a few friends over. Okay, cool. Do you tend to buy extra groceries for this thing? Well, yeah, probably. And then, on and on, you start pushing and tugging and kind of pulling at them a little bit, and you realize okay, you're dramatically undershooting. And so part of this process is just being honest with yourself, not in a bad way. I'm not shaming anybody who wants to spend a ton of money on anything, as much as I'm saying, just be honest. Mm-hmm. And so, if you know that when push comes to shove, your kid's birthday's this month,
and you're going to spend $1,000 on that,
on just
whole
on
event.
the whole shebang, because you're going to have all the kids come over and all the friends, and you're going to overbuy the food because you want to make, be a good host. And you're going to get the super birthday cake, and you're going to rent the inflatable, and you're going to go hard in the paint.
Just be honest.
Just be honest about it. Yeah. And let's just plan for it. You know what I mean? And some of you parents are listening going what? Yup, that's crazy. And it's great.
And some of you parents are only $1,000?
Yes, totally. And so it's that's cool. Just be honest with yourself about what it is, and then let's plan on it.
Yeah.
So that then when that day comes, you're not
and let's make healthy trade-offs
to
do it instead of taking away from your retirement.
Totally.
Yeah.
So another common one that I see, kids are especially where this gets tricky, especially when they start getting that high school to college age, because all of a sudden parents start feeling like every moment could be the last this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this is the last summer. We've got all the family. This is the last whatever before they get married. This is the last. And look, I'm not hating on you if you're a parent, you're doing this. I'm just telling you this is the psychology, right? And the problem is you can last this thing yourself into the poorhouse, because you think this is the last this, so we got to go hard. And then it's the last that, so you got to go hard on that. And then it's the last, and then you got to go hard on that. And all of a sudden
you just justify a lot of overspending.
You just justify a lot of overspending. And then again, you get to, way down the road, and all of a sudden it's not so fun. And that's the key where...
It's interesting too, right? I mean, this just plays out in so many different ways. So you overspend on kids' birthdays for 15 years, and maybe it means you don't have the college fund that you intended to have saved up for your kids.
Yes.
And so it's just...
you overspend on your kids for the first 25 years of their life, which then means you need to extend your working years.
Yeah.
And you're not able to be around the grandparent the way that you would like to be, or...
You're having to ask your kids
for money, which I see. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not hating. If you're listening, you're that's my situation.
We're not shaming.
I'm not shaming that.
It's just
I'm just
how
showing
do we prevent?
How do you prevent getting there if you can? And it's really hard. This tug of war. It's this constant living for the moment, blessing my family now, doing the thing now, taking the experience now, while also recognizing we need to prepare for the future, because odds are you will continue living. And when you get to that future, you're going to wish that you had saved more.
So what's something actionable that we can do to help with this?
The way that we do it, and the way that I try to help people do it, is these really, really long-term things and the medium-term things. I try to come up with a target that would be a bare minimum. Mm-hmm. So if we take retirement, for example, if I'm running retirement calcs, I'll say, what is the absolute oldest that you would like to retire? That you would go good grief, if I am not retired by that age, I'm going to be really upset with myself. Whatever that number is, could be 60 for some people, could be 55 for some people. Most of the time it's mid to late 60s, maybe early 70s, whatever that number is. Then we figure out what you need to be saving per month based on that age. And so it's okay, you need to be investing at least this much money every single month, and that will be able to allow you to retire at 72. And then that becomes absolute non-negotiable. And so then that becomes this thing that is totally untouchable. So non-negotiable
that you're going to go into credit card debt.
Yes, before doing that. You're going to miss utility bills. And maybe not that, but you're going to catch up. It's this, it's this mindset. Yeah.
You mentally have to be that dedicated to it, or to break that cycle of
Okay,
just,
don't skip your utility
just
bill,
taking
people.
from the thing. Yeah.
But
Nick True told me.
yeah, he said it was fine. No, but like that mentality of like, I don't miss rent.
Yeah.
I don't miss utilities. And I will literally eat, something that's cardboard out of my cabinet before I miss this contribution to the retirement account.
It just has to be so real for you.
Yes.
And, like I think I said earlier, just like kick the can down the road infinitely to infinity or whatever. And it's like, the fact is you can't kick the can down the road to infinity. So at some point, the day will come where it's like, either you get forced to retire, maybe your company makes you retire, maybe for health reasons you have to retire, whatever. All of these things will catch up to you at some point, and like you will have to come to terms with reality. And so putting yourself in that place of like, okay, how am I going to prepare for this day? And
starting with that bare minimum, right, is a helpful way to go, okay, that's the non-negotiable amount. Now, the ideal is I want to retire at 65 or 62 or whatever it is. Okay, well, you need to be investing this number to make that happen.
Yeah.
So in between the bare minimum and ideal, well, that's the number that you can play with as far as trade-offs are concerned, right? If you do have this once in a lifetime opportunity with your, 18-year-old who's never going to be at home anymore and I want to take this trip or whatever it is, then great. You can now at least consciously decide if you want to make that trade-off.
Yeah.
Or
like I can still meet my bare minimum amount here and take for this thing and know that it's all
what. And so I like to do that for the really long-term stuff like retirement. And then I also like to do it for the other shorter medium-term stuff. Right. And so I'll ask that question for Christmas savings.
Yeah.
Right? What's the bare minimum you want to have for Christmas?
Yeah. Like for Christmas, we normally have like Christmas decor and different things. And that is something where we go, well, you know what, actually we got some new decor last year and we don't have any need for new decor. That was just a totally fun thing. So we are willing to cut that.
There are some years where we buy a 4-foot real Christmas tree, and there are some years where we buy a 7-foot real Christmas tree, depending on whether we stole the money or not leading up to Christmas, or whatever. Yeah. And then there's like that other, the long-ish medium term. So this is like saving for kids' college. And so often I'll ask parents and say, in your view, right, for yourself to feel how you want to feel as a parent in terms of what you feel is your responsibility to helping your kids out with secondary education, how much money is the bare minimum? Is it 0? Are you like, actually, I'm cool with them being totally on their own? Is it, I want to at least have 5,000, 40,000, right? Like, what is that number that you're like, again, I'm going to be really kicking myself and feeling like I probably should have pulled back in order to save more if I'm not at least at this number. And then we build that in as a bare minimum. And then all the other things that you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, those trade-offs, those buckets become untouchable. And then you get to make trade-offs with the other stuff, which does give you a lot of freedom and control over your budget while knowing you're not jeopardizing those longer-term things.
I think that's such an important point because a lot of people have so much resistance to budgeting because it's like it feels like this negative thing that's just always telling them what they can't do.
Totally.
And that's not what the budget is at all. The budget is you coming up with your vision and values and figuring out how you want to spend your money, how you want to give your dollars jobs in order to align with the things that you said were so important. So the important thing to recognize is like you absolutely are in control. Like you're not out of control and the budget's just like the disciplinarian thing there, like, nope, you don't get to choose to do that. It's like, no, you absolutely can choose what you want to do here, and you can absolutely choose what you're telling your dollars their job is going to be.
I think it's funny that you say that, right? Because you 100%, well, I don't want to put this in your mouth, but like you definitely, I think, felt early in our marriage that I was coming at you with my budget stick, ready to just beat you down.
Yeah, no fun, Nick was the joke. Like we've said that on the podcast before. I think,
now you're like, you're very into your 4 or 5 categories that you pay attention to, your fund spending, your art supplies, your education monies, like you manage those incredibly tightly and you're constantly like running, do I want to do this month or that this month? Do I want to save up and save for this, fancier art supply thing? Or do I want to, wait or get something now and then kind of push that out? You're always making trade-offs with your stuff.
Totally.
It's just like a total 180, which I think is really funny.
It makes me think of this quote, and I cannot remember where I read it, but it was something along the lines of like excess kills gratitude or something. It's basically just the idea that like if you don't place limits on something, so let's say that you're like, I'm gonna eat M&Ms until I puke.
It's like Halloween candy.
Yeah. Like, do you enjoy that as much as you do like, oh, I've got this piece of chocolate cake. I'm savoring every bite because it's a pretty small piece of cake and it's, oh man, it's so good. And you just like savor it. Whereas if you know I have Halloween candy to infinity, you just pop back one piece after another of Halloween candy and you don't actually enjoy or savor any of it. And so the same way, if I had an infinite amount of money to go and spend on art supplies or at TJ Maxx or whatever, I don't put like part of the enjoyment that I get out of my purchases is thinking about like, okay,
which one's most important?
What is in alignment with the things that I'm working towards right now, and maybe the skills that I'm trying to develop, or whatever. And it's thinking through it that makes me appreciate the thing, and it's limits that put us into that headspace. So like limits are good. Limits are good.
There's absolutely something about going back to this idea of like when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. In some ways, you saying no is you explicitly stating that you are placing more value on the thing that you said yes to, which almost inherently like brings it more value and makes it more valuable to you. It becomes just like
you appreciate it more.
Yes.
If you know that you sacrificed your spending money in order to spend more on this gift for the person that you wanted to give a gift to, I think that that's like an inherently more positive experience, and you just go like, yeah, I value my relationship with them so much, and it makes me happy to like sacrifice that fun spending money this month and give it to them in this way. And like you enjoy that process even more because you know the trade-off that you've made, and you actually feel that trade-off. It doesn't just feel like you're pulling money from the money tree.
Totally.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the main point is that like we are recognizing everything we've been talking about works together. Like you have to recognize that you have limits. By recognizing you have limits, you then need to think about short, medium, long-term things that you want to work towards and prioritize so that you can use your limited resources towards those. And then by doing that, you actually do end up enjoying. The budget becomes this joy to use, not this beating stick that controls you, because it helps you do the things that matter the most to you, which is like the whole reason that Mapped Out Money exists in the first place.
Yeah, it really does become a thing that, like, if you're married, I think it can bring you together in your relationship. I think it's a really positive way to have like values conversations as a family.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just becomes this really rich thing. No pun intended.
That's good.
All right. It is getting toasty in this Airstream. I think it's time for you to bring us home. So what's our wrap up takeaway for this episode?
Well, we're starting with the assumption that you are tracking your money already. So if that's not you, go watch our other videos and learn how to track your money. But once you're doing that and you're trying to actually move towards making decisions with the budget, you got to embrace trade-offs. You got to recognize you are limited. You do not get everything you want, and that inherently every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. So start making that decision proactively. 2, in order to do that, you got to have a vision. We're going to link up some episodes in the description below on visioning. So if you do not have your vision dialed in, you can watch those and get that figured out. You got to have short, medium, and long-term things. And I'm going to give a little bonus here, just like idea, literally just thinking of it, is we need to create views in YNAB and group our categories based on short, medium, long term. And so if I'm thinking of wanting to buy something that's not in the budget and I want to make a trade-off, I can click on the medium view, and I need to cover medium with other medium items. I need to cover short with other short items and longs with other long items.
That's a good practice. Yeah.
So it really kind of, takes that to the next level and forces that behavior.
I love it. Who is the pastor who does the vision retreat stuff?
Ooh, I couldn't tell you.
Jimmy Evans.
Jimmy
Evans.
Okay.
I was just going to say, like, if you're a Christian, obviously he's coming at this from a Christian perspective, but you've never visioned before, especially like if you're married and you've never visioned before, I think that they're a really great place to start.
Yeah, totally.
And he has a whole like vision workbook thing that
very good. Very approachable and like baby steps you into this process.
Yep. So we'll link that in the description too.
Perfect. Thanks for watching, y'all.
Bye.